Just by removing small barriers, it's enough to make the behavior automatic. Willpower is required when something feels hard to start, but that design reduces the effort and therefore the action becomes more likely. Hi, I'm Dr. Bree Hearn, and welcome to The Habit Nerd, the podcast where we explore the habits that shape how we live, work, and lead. Most of what we do each day isn't driven by big, conscious decisions. It's driven by habits, quiet, repeated patterns that over time become the silent architects of our lives. In these solo episodes, I'll walk you through the ideas, research, and practical strategies you can actually apply so you can shift those patterns with intention and create change that sticks. Let's dive in. Hi there, welcome back to another episode of the Habit Nerd podcast. Now, looking at my recent numbers, my recent analytics in terms of the podcast, I am having a really great uptick in listenership. So my download numbers are increasing significantly and I'm being listened to in 90 countries actually as we speak. What I can take from that is that many people in episodes like this one are new to the podcast. So thank you for being here. Welcome to our community. And I'm so pleased and feel such gratitude that of all of the content that we have available to us and the hugely saturated marketplace in terms of things like podcasting, that you're choosing to have me in your ears. I'm really, really pleased to have you here. Thank you also to my warm and loyal listenership. If you listen every Monday, I feel you. I'm so grateful for your engagement. And I hope that I'm able to keep you here because I hope that I continue to help and entertain. But even if you dip in and out, I'm so heartened when I see those numbers. And every single one of you, I'm imagining, going on your walk or listening to me in the car or while you're doing the dishes. And so thank you. Thank you for being here. And please do keep engaging. I'm, so eternally grateful for it. Today I'm doing a theme. I'm looking at a theme that is something that has come up over and over quite recently in terms of my own coaching work that I do with individual clients. This is the sort of work I do with professionals who are looking to augment their practice, get better at managing their time and their productivity at work so that they can get home and do things that they love, spend time with their family and their friends, or engage in hobbies. Basically, I coach people on healthy habits, whatever that means to them. So basically, well-being for performance. So what is coming up over and over are these four, I guess, overarching principles of behavior change. And I think because I'm coming back to the same conversation and the same research over and over, often that's a cue to me that this has wider effect and that, I might be coaching 6 people at the time and that's 6 people, but I know that it is obviously representative of a much larger section of the community. So I hope that you find these 4 principles helpful. The first one, when we want to change behavior or embed a new habit, is this idea of environmental design. We need to stop relying on our willpower. There's too much on our minds in this modern society, and our willpower is a diminishing resource. So we need to hack our environment to make the choice that we want to make the absolute easiest one to do. So I'll give you some examples. If you want to stop scrolling on your phone, just put it in another room. Don't rely on your willpower to do that. It's as simple as when you're working, putting it face down in a drawer or putting it in another room entirely, or charging your phone not next to your bed where it's within arm's reach for when you go to sleep or when you wake up. It's charging it over on the carpet, plugged into the wall, which is what I do. So all it is, instead of relying on my willpower to not go into Instagram and scroll or check my email when I'm in bed, which is the worst possible thing that I find my mental health suffers from, where it affects my sleep if it's late at night, and it really does put me on the wrong footing for the day if it's early in the morning, simply by hacking my environment and plugging it in on the other side of the room. It's a complete change in my behavior. So you need to design your space so that your good habits are the easiest ones. A couple of examples: there was a landmark study called the Hospital Cafeteria Study. James Clear references this in his book, and I've seen it in a few other pieces of literature because it's quite seminal research. But basically it was in America, and all they did was they placed water in more visible locations around the hospital cafeteria. It related to both bottled water that you could purchase and also like water bubblers, so that, that fountain water where people could go and have filtered water for free. They didn't remove any soft drink or soda, as they call it, in America. So they put water in more visible locations, but they didn't take any of the soft drink away that was already there. And what this did was it led to higher water consumption and lower sales of the soft drink. So simply by putting the water in more visible locations. You might recognize this in your own house. If you say you want to eat more fruit or more vegetables or more, whole food, if you have that at eye level in the fridge, or you have your fruit bowl and you hide junk food in cupboards, so you might hide, your chocolate or your chocolate biscuits or whatever it is that you're trying to eat less of over the back of the cupboard, and, behind some, cans of tuna or vegetables or whatever, you're going to be much less likely to even remember that it's there. There was another study called the beer study, and this is where the creators of the study put beer within eye line in the fridge of the participants, and then the other group, they still bought the same amount of beer, but they put it on the bottom shelf of the fridge behind some other things, and so it was out of the participants' eye line. And not surprisingly, the group who couldn't see the beer just completely forgot that it was there, and therefore their alcohol consumption was, greatly diminished. And I should say that both groups, the control group and the research group, typically drank the same amount of beer at the start of the experiment. So they would typically have one beer after dinner every night, and then yet the group whose beer, 6-pack of beer was out of vision altogether, either stopped drinking it or drank far less, which was the desired result of that group. We need to remove the friction for our good behaviors. So an example of that is I like to exercise early in the morning, but with the weather here in Melbourne getting cooler and darker, it would be very easy to stay in bed, to snuggle back down under my covers and turn my alarm off and not go to the gym or not go out for my walk. But if I have my workout clothes lying on the carpet, I have everything there. I have my shorts, top, underwear, socks, sneakers, even the jacket that I'm going to put over it, then it really does remove any friction to me going out. The friction would be if I had to go into the drawers, find things that are comfortable and that are appropriate and that, I'm happy to wear. That would be enough friction for me to maybe go, oh, it's too hard. Another one is I'm struggling to get enough water in. I'm really being conscious of my hydration, and because now I live in a 2-story house, if I don't have my water bottle next to my bed when I go to bed, I'm not likely to drink it when I wake up, even though I'm quite thirsty and really need some water. So it's as simple now as before I go upstairs to go to bed, I fill up my drink bottle and I make sure it's on my bedside table. So just by removing small barriers, it's enough to make the behavior automatic. Willpower is required when something feels hard to start, but that design reduces the effort and therefore the action becomes more likely. So the simple takeaway with this one around environmental design is that good habits need to be the path of least resistance. Behavior can shift without motivation or persuasion because it's the environment that is doing the heavy lifting there. So that's the first principle of behavior design, or of embedding a new habit, basically designing your environment for success. The second one is this idea of the 2-minute rule. Now, this comes from many researchers, but it's about basically making the behavior too small to fail. I interviewed Dr. Gina Cleo last year. She is a habit researcher. She's an assistant professor at Bond University. And she told me that she had a cold and was unwell a couple of weeks prior to our interview. And so she's quite into like powerlifting at the gym. And so she does that every single morning. But because she got sick, there was a couple of weeks where she didn't go. So what she did do when she started to feel better, she felt a bit overwhelmed by the thought of going back and the thought of how long it would take her to get back to the stage where she was, even though it was only a couple of weeks. So she told herself to make the habit as embarrassingly small as she could. So what she did was, for the first couple of days of the week, she just drove to the gym and she drove home. She didn't even go in. And I laughed with her about that example, but the science behind it is basically you prove to yourself that you can do it before you optimize it. So you do the habit, even the most smallest version of it, before worrying about making a good version of that habit. So say you want to start reading more books. Say, a little bit like me, you do a lot of academic reading, or a lot of your reading relates to your work or nonfiction. And then, when you get home, you're just likely to flop on the couch and watch Netflix, and you decide that you want to start reading for pleasure again. This is a familiar story for me. There's no point, and it is tempting, and I recognize this in myself, to be honest. I would say I want to read 20 books by the end of the year. It's much better to read one page. So if your goal is to read more books, the 2-minute version of it is to read one page before bed. This does a few things. It removes the mental barrier of I don't have time, and activation energy in terms of chemistry is so important. In terms of physics is so important here, because starting is the hardest part. Once you begin, you're much more likely to keep going. So instead of reading, I should read for 30 minutes, just start with, I'm going to read one page. Another example is if your big goal is to exercise regularly, the 2-minute version is put on your workout gear. It eliminates the friction of getting started, and then once you're dressed, doing at least something feels more natural. So you don't say to yourself, I'm going to do a full workout. You just say, I'm going to get dressed for movement. Hi there, quick one. If your habits feel all over the place right now, listen up. I've created a 17-day tiny habits reset. And it's not about waking up at 5 a.m. or overhauling your life. It's about the small, invisible habits that are already running the show and how to shift them fast. In just a few minutes a day, you'll start to build habits that actually stick, feel more in control, and finally trust yourself again. No pressure, no perfection, just real change that lasts. The waitlist link for the 17-day Tiny Habits Reset is sitting right inside the show notes of this exact episode. So pause this for a second, scroll down, tap the link, and secure your spot before the doors officially open. I can't wait to see you in there. You might be someone who wants to write more. So you want to write daily. Say you want to write in your journal daily, or you want to write a blog post or an article, or you want to do some research daily. The 2-minute version of that is write one sentence. Now, this works because it reduces that perfectionism and the cognitive load and the overwhelm, and it gets you past that blank page problem. Now, this came up in a coaching call I did yesterday. There's nothing worse than that blank page on a screen, whether it's on a computer screen or a physical blank page in a book, and that cursor just almost teasing you, just staring back at you, almost saying, you can't do this, you need to fill this whole page. But if all you say is, I'm going to write one sentence, anybody can write one sentence. So you don't say, I'm going to write 1,000 words. You say, I'm just going to open the doc and write a sentence. So the 2-minute rule turns habits into entry points, not outcomes. You're not committing to the full behavior. All you're committing to is the start. So that's the second one. That is the 2-minute rule. Now, the third one is this idea of habit stacking. This is where we connect the new to the known. Your brain has already built strong and really well-worn neural pathways for your current habits, like brushing your teeth, okay? So you don't need to think about brushing your teeth because it is a settled tendency. It's something that you do with complete automaticity. So to stack something you want to do onto a habit that you already have makes it much more likely, because of the connection between the old embedded habit and the new habit that you want to start, it makes it much more likely that the connection between the two things will mean that you'll do both. Language really matters here. So you need to say, after current habit, I will new habit. For example, after I pour my morning coffee, I'll write down my 3 main priorities for the day. Therefore, you're having a coffee anyway. It's something that your brain just automatically goes to do. So if you have your notebook there and pen, you know now that you're going to stack writing your 3 main priorities for that day onto the habit of drinking your coffee. The other thing is maybe it's a similar habit to the one that you've already got in place. So let's use our teeth brushing example. You might want to start flossing. So therefore, your habit stack is, after I brush my teeth, I will floss. And it basically hitchhikes on a routine that your brain already does on autopilot, and it makes it much, much easier. In terms of a work focus stack, you might say something like, after I sit down at my desk, I will write my top priority for that day. Because sitting at your desk happens every workday, but you might find yourself in a habit where you look through your email, or you feel a bit overwhelmed about the 16 priorities that you're trying to balance and you can't quite make a decision about which one. So I will sit down at my desk. After I sit down at my desk, I will write my top priority for the day, meaning that's a habit that you've written it and therefore you just go ahead with it. So it's a clear transition into focused work. That type of stacking helps reduce this decision fatigue because the cue already triggers the next action. So attaching a new habit to an existing one means that you don't have to remember it or to rely on willpower. Now, the next principle I'd like to talk to you about is this idea of never miss twice. Now, this is basically protecting the identity of the new habit. One mistake is a piece of data. So, that's everyone falls off the wagon. But 2 mistakes is the start of a new habit. Missing once doesn't ruin your progress, but it does test your identity. So we all know that life happens. You'll miss a workout or you'll miss a meditation session. But the idea is try not to miss 2 days in a row. This shift moves you from a perfectionist mindset to a consistent one. It's more about being the person who gets back on track immediately. So let's think of some examples. An exercise habit. Return the next day, even if it's small. So the scenario might be on Monday, you skip your planned workout because you had a really busy day. On Tuesday, you must do something, even if it's 5 minutes. So it might look like this. I missed yesterday, so today I'll do a short walk or I'll do a 5-minute workout. It prevents one skipped session turning into a whole week off, which might feel familiar to you. A week can turn into 2 weeks and 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden you're completely off the bandwagon of the habit that you had worked so hard to establish. Because even a small action breaks the miss twice pattern and it keeps that momentum going. I know sometimes I miss a day of writing or doing something in my academic work because I've just been too busy, or I've been in back-to-back meetings, or maybe I've not been well. So the idea is I show up the next day no matter what. So the scenario is I don't write anything one day because I've been in too many meetings. The next day, and throw back to my 2-minute habit, I write at least one sentence in a document, because that avoids the spiral of, this whole week, don't worry about it, I'll restart next week. And it reinforces the identity that, yeah, I'm someone who writes regularly. You might want to pay a little bit more attention to nourishing your body with nutritious food. And I hear this over and over, this idea that, my diet's gone to the you-know-what, so don't worry about it, I'll just forget about it and go back to my old undesirable eating habits. A scenario that's much better in terms of the never miss twice is to just reset at the next opportunity. Think about it like this. At lunch, you eat something that you didn't plan to eat because you had a really busy day and there was no time to prepare lunch. And so you went and got something from the nearest takeaway that was available and quick and that you could fit in, but it wasn't something that you felt great about eating from a mental point of view, but also your body didn't appreciate it either. It's lunchtime. All you have to do by the time it's dinner is return to your intended habit. You don't have to write the whole day off, or you don't have to, if it's a bad day, if you've 3 meals and 2 snacks in a day haven't been great, and we've all had days like this or weeks like this when we've been on holidays or overwhelmed or busy, it's fine. It just means at the next possible opportunity, and the sooner the better, so that you can remind yourself of your identity of somebody who cares for your body, return to your intended habit. The meal didn't go to plan, so dinner will be aligned with my goals. It stops a one off-track decision becoming a full day or a full week of drift, and it breaks the what the hell effect, where one slip leads to more and then an ongoing kind of snowball or waterfall effect, and then the habit's completely over. So the idea of never missing twice is you focus on the recovery. So, recovering the habit, not perfection. And consistency is built by how quickly you return, not by never ever slipping. So we allow ourselves the slip, but then we tell ourselves, okay, back on track. And the back on track doesn't have to be a perfect version of back on track. It just needs to be something, because that really does reinforce the identity of somebody who, is putting effort into that part of your habit formation identity. So I hope that they were helpful, and I hope that only 4 is simple enough for you to remember and simple enough for you to piggyback on maybe one that feels relevant to you. So just an example, we had environmental design, so that you can stop relying on willpower and actually design your environment so that the easy thing is the right thing. The second one was a 2-minute rule, making your habits too small to fail. The third one is habit stacking, connecting the new to the known and the already established. And the last one is this idea of never miss twice. Now, thank you again for engaging with me on this episode. Love you to share it with somebody that you think might get benefit from it. Love you to connect with me on Instagram. And if you think that more personalized coaching around some of this stuff is what you would like for either just you or for the people that you work with in a team base, make sure you contact me via DM over at The Habit Nerd. I've got a few spots opening up in terms of both keynote speaking and coaching. And I'm really loving doing this work because it's research informed, but it's people based, which is absolutely my happy place. So thank you to all of those people who are already working with me and sharing my work. Thanks to you as my listeners. Have a great week, and I look forward to connecting with you next Monday. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love you to share it with someone who might need it too. Because sometimes one conversation, one idea, or one small shift can change everything. Thank you for being with me here on the Habit Nerd podcast. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which this episode was recorded, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Take care, habit nerds, and remember the habits you practice today are quietly shaping your tomorrow.